Hi everyone, happy Veganuary. Yes, it's January and it's the month when many people decide to try a vegan diet or even a vegetarian diet. So this is the Insta Live for you if you're interested in going vegan, going vegetarian, or just introducing some more plant foods into your diet, but to ensure that it's a nutritionally balanced and healthy diet. I'm really excited to be talking to Harpreet Sohal, who is a fellow dietitian with a specific interest and specialist knowledge around plant-based eating, and to be able to download on all her expertise and answer lots of frequently asked questions about plant-based diets and how to do them correctly. She works privately for city dietitians where she gives lots of advice around I'm just going to let veggie nut around plant-based eating, but also works in the NHS with adults and children following orthopaedic surgeries and sarcoma. So Harpreet, so lovely to see you again. Not
Hi.
often I start these chats with saying hi to someone with their surname first before I say hi to them with their first name.
No
Thanks so
problem.
much for joining me tonight.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you. How are
I
you
have
doing?
so been looking forward to this chat all day. In fact, I have even put on my kale t-shirt. Doesn't look great from up
That's
front, or it's sort of a
brilliant.
reverse image, but it was a Christmas present from one of my work colleagues and one of my proud possessions. So I thought we have got so many questions around this topic. I think it's such a hot topic given it's January and Veganuary
Yeah,
and more people are going plant-based. So can we just start shitting off with them? I was thinking, first of all, let's define what a plant-based diet is.
yeah, sure. Also, your jumper is great. I think I need to get one of those for myself.
I'll
um,
send you the link.
Thanks. So, yeah, plant-based eating. So, plant-based diets as such, they don't really have a strict definition at the moment. So, it kind of essentially is what it says on the tin. So, it's your eating pattern that's based largely around mainly plant-based foods, and then that can range from people who include some meat, fish, dairy, to all the way to the other end, which is vegan diets essentially, which exclude all animal products. Um, so yeah, it can be a wide range, and it's quite a fluid umbrella term, I would say. Yeah,
And are they good for us? Should we all be doing them?
it's a good question. I think as dietitians, we probably all say there's no kind of one diet that we would recommend for everybody, or say, this is the best diet, everybody needs to follow this. So in that sense, I would say there are some health benefits that have been associated with plant-based diets or vegetarian or vegan diets. And that would be things like being at low risk of developing type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, even certain cancers. But actually, some of the studies show that those people who follow those diets as such actually do lots of other things in their lifestyle. So, exercise, not drinking alcohol very much, or not smoking, which also could be related to the reason that you're at low risk of developing those types of conditions. So it's quite hard at the moment. There's no major evidence that says these vegan diets are the causes of why you don't develop these diseases. So as a whole, I would say it's not necessarily the best diet for you. It's a very individual decision, and I think we might touch on that a bit later as well. So yeah, that's my answer.
So can everyone do a vegan diet or follow a vegan diet? Are there some people that it would not be advised? I'm thinking children, pregnant ladies.
Yeah, so interestingly, the British Dietetic Association, the BDA, they actually have said that it can be, as long as it's well planned, and it contains all the nutrients that you need, it can actually be a healthy way to for everybody at all stages of their life, so adults, children, whether you're pregnant or breastfeeding, it can actually allow you to have support healthy living essentially. But I would say some people, for example, I work with cancer patients on a day-to-day basis, and they are a particularly vulnerable group who might find lots of misinformation online, which says, plant-based diets or vegan diets are the best way to go to try and reduce your risk of cancer recurrence or any other illnesses. I think when you're unwell, it's probably not the best time to make drastic changes to your diet, and especially if that means excluding a whole food group or a couple of food groups, without that support from maybe a dietitian who can help you make sure that you're having a well-balanced diet. And the other probably group of people is maybe people who have a bit more of a complex relationship with food, and the motivation for wanting to do a restrictive diet is a bit iffy. So yeah, I think on the whole it can definitely work for lots of people, but with support from a dietitian is probably advisable.
Yeah, so it's about doing it properly, and I guess planning, and just skilling yourself up before you throw yourself into it, because a vegan diet can be healthy or unhealthy, if I'm reading between the lines of what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I probably should have mentioned before when we were talking about, is it the best way to eat? Actually, there have also been, on the flip side of those potential health benefits, there are some studies that show you could be at increased risk of brain fractures. And as you can tell from what I've already said, you can be at risk of developing nutrient deficiencies as well, which we'll talk probably more about later too. So yeah, it's all about.
Let's go into it. What are some of the key nutritional deficiencies that you see with people who are following perhaps a vegan diet, maybe vegetarians?
Yeah, so it's there are actually quite a few that could potentially develop, just because if you're thinking about excluding meat and dairy, they actually contain, those two food groups contain a lot of different nutrients. So I would pick out a couple, for example. So the common ones people talk about are vitamin B12, for example, and that's mainly found in animal products. So if you're not having any animal products at all, you're most likely going to have to think about where you're getting that from in your plant-based vegan or vegetarian diet. And for people who are more strict, so say vegan diets, we would always recommend to try and include foods that are fortified already, so have B12 added into them. So things like your breakfast cereals, Marmite, nutritional yeast, those types of things, soya, or plant-based products like your milks, your yogurts, dairy products. Try and make sure that they're all fortified with B12. Another one that's quite commonly actually missed out is iodine, which I'm a big supporter of, only because we don't talk about it that much. So iodine, again, is mainly found in dairy products. And food sources aren't actually that huge. So the main ones would probably be seaweed, but I mean, not many people, I don't think, eat seaweed that regularly in the British culture in our country. So there are not many sources of iodine, so again that's probably something you'd have to consider supplementing, or you can get now more frequently, you've got more products like plant-based milks that have iodine added in, but again not all of them do. So it's a lot about reading labels and trying to find out what's best for you and what you're missing from your diet, and how you can replace that.
Yeah, perfect. So, and I guess just to add into that obviously organic plant-based alternatives can't be fortified, so just worth noting that. And they're also fortified with other nutrients as well as iodine?
Yeah, so usually you have your B12, your calcium, your vitamin D in there, and some other B vitamins. And sometimes, you'll have the iodine. So it's always, I always say to everybody who I talk to about plant-based diets, try and make sure that all of your dairy alternatives, so your milk, your yogurts, even some of the cheeses have those vitamins and minerals added into them. Yeah.
Great. And what other nutrients should we be looking out for?
There are lots. So another one probably quite commonly people think about is calcium. And again, that's usually found in dairy products. So if you're cutting out dairy, similar to the B12, try and go for your plant-based alternatives that are fortified, so with the calcium. But also you get a little bits of calcium from other foods, so things like sesame seeds, tahini, which is the paste made from sesame seeds, a little bit from some dark green leafy vegetables. So they can be found little bits in other foods, but your main sources are probably going to be your dairy kind of alternatives.
Great. And in terms of, talking about what a nutritionally balanced vegan diet looks like, and the same applies, I guess, for a vegetarian diet and even those that are trying to go a lot more plant-based. What does a nutritionally balanced diet look like? I mean, we've mentioned a couple of the nutrients, but roughly, if people are trying to guide themselves of how they should navigate the food groups.
Yeah, it's interesting because actually I don't think it's that dissimilar from a normal kind of omnivorous diet, really, in the sense that in terms of the food groups, you think about your starchy carbohydrates because those are the foods that will give you the energy and your B vitamins, and those would be things I think most people probably know, but just typically things like cereals, bread, pasta, rice, that type of thing. And then you've got your protein. So obviously you go for the plant-based proteins, and that would be things typically like your beans, pulses, legumes, nuts, seeds. Soya products are pretty good as well. I think we might talk about that, the contention about soya later, but soy products are quite good as well for protein, and actually like your bread, a lot of breads now, especially if you've got nuts and seeds, they're quite high in protein too, so a couple of slices is actually a decent amount of protein. And then if you're having, say for example, beans or beans on toast, that's actually quite high in protein if you're having a bit of toast and beans as well. So yeah, that's the other food group. And then you've got your kind of calcium rich foods, which we've spoken about already, so your dairy alternatives. And then you've got your fruit and veg, of course, as we're always talking about, trying to increase our portions of fruit and veg when we can. And then a small amount of your kind of healthy unsaturated fats. And those are typically things like your rapeseed oil, or olive oil, and then also if we think about your omega-3s, so these are your kind of healthy fats that are important for your heart health, and brain function. So you can find those in things like your walnuts, flaxseed, linseed, and again rapeseed oil is a good source of that. So if you're including little bits of this in your, rapeseed oil in your cooking, for example, every day, over the course of the day or the week, you're probably getting enough omega-3s as you go along. Things like flaxseed and chia seed, they're quite easy to add into if you eat porridge, for example, or with your yogurt or in a smoothie, something like that. So yeah, there's a few tips for that kind of thing.
Brilliant, lots of tips. So let's talk about soya. Is soya healthy for us, or is it not?
Yeah, so I think a little while ago it became quite a misconception, I would say, that based on some studies that were mainly done in animals, they thought that having high amounts of soya actually could increase your risk of developing certain cancers, for example, and weren't very healthy for you. But actually, at the moment, the current evidence is saying that the molecules, the things that we thought were bad for us in the soya, so they're called isoflavones, and they're basically similar chemical structure to estrogen. And estrogen, we know, actually can be a cause of some kind of cancers, for example, breast cancer. But actually what they found is that they're not like for like. So the plant-based estrogen that we see in soya, or isoflavones, wouldn't have the same effect as eating foods that contain actual estrogen. So on the whole, the evidence at the moment is saying that soya is a great source of protein, fibre, and it's not something that we need to be too scared of. And actually, I would encourage most people to include it as a good source of protein, and especially in a vegan or vegetarian diet.
Fantastic. We had a question come in about hemp oil, and you mentioned good, healthy fats. Do you have a view about hemp oil, hemp seeds? Is it good? Is there something about the omega-3/6 ratio?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. Hemp oil is so hemp is a seed that actually is one of the very few that is that contains all of your essential amino acids. So that, as an aside, when we're thinking about proteins, is quite useful to know. To be honest, I'm going to be truthful. I'm not sure about the 3:6 ratio, but I know it is definitely a good source of omega-3. But in terms of the ratio, I'm not entirely sure. But that's definitely something I can have a look at and get back to you on.
Awesome. That would be perfect.
Yeah, no worries.
And Protein. You mentioned protein. Can you get enough protein on a vegan or vegetarian diet?
Yeah, again, that's that's something that is very commonly asked. And I think, like we've kind of already been mentioning before, if you're getting the balance of your overall food groups right on a, say, on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, if you're including things like protein in most of your meals, I would say, protein-rich food, sorry, in most of your meals, and maybe some of your snacks if you're, say, exercising more or trying to build a muscle. Then I would say generally that there isn't really much of a concern about not eating enough protein. You just have to make sure you're not just having a meal that's carbohydrates and vegetables and no protein at all. So yeah, I think if generally if you're sensible about it and aware of foods that are high in protein, your protein needs can definitely be met. Yeah.
We've had a great comment come through. A number of times I get asked, where do you get your protein from?
Yeah.
And it's true. Everybody associates protein as being meat, I guess, or fish. And there are lots of fantastic sources of protein that are plant-based, aren't there?
Yeah, definitely. And also, actually, kind of on that note, there are, as you know, you've probably seen adverts for Veganuary, and all the shops and restaurants and things are bringing out new meals and food products. There sometimes people can think that the meat alternatives, so things like your burgers, usually burgers or kind of soy mince or anything like that, I would say when it comes to those types of products, just be a little bit aware of what they're made of, because anything that's soy based generally is okay, but then you've got things that, say for example, jackfruit burgers, they're not really a like for like in terms of the amount of protein that's in there, and also most of these things have coconut oil added in or some kind of other saturated fat, which is the one that we kind of try to avoid in terms or limit in terms of our heart health. So usually they can be quite high in added fat, added salt, even added sugar, depending on what the products are. When we're thinking about the alternatives, so it's just something to be aware of. Maybe just have a look pick up a few products in the supermarket aisle and just have a look at the labels and see what they're made of, what's the fat content, that type of thing, is important as well.
Yeah, I think wise words. I think a processed diet, be it animal based or plant based,
Yeah.
has, comes with all these things such as bad fats or higher salt. So just to kind of carefully navigate any processed foods, I think, even if they are plant-based and sort of marketed themselves, there can
Yeah,
be
definitely.
a lot of good marketing out there. So we have to sort of learn how to navigate that.
Yeah.
And obviously you get the question a lot around protein. I suppose iron is the other one. Iron and zinc are two nutrients that we also tend to get a lot from animal products and meat products. Any sort of top tips on where we can get those from if we're avoiding animal-based products?
Yeah, so iron and zinc kind of are quite similar in the sense that, like you said, they both do come largely from animal products. So if you think about iron, we know that there are two types of iron. So we've got the one that's kind of animal based, so that's called heme iron, and the other type is plant based, so that's the non-heme iron. And generally, you know that the plant-based iron isn't absorbed as well as the meat-based iron. But we can try to kind of mitigate that slightly by combining the plant-based iron foods with a little bit of vitamin C. So vitamin C is usually found in citrus foods, bell peppers, orange juice, that type of thing. So if you're having those types of things with your meals that contain iron-rich foods, they can help increase absorption. And actually, iron-rich foods in themselves would be things like, they're found in lots of foods, so things like your pulses, your lentils, chickpeas, beans, that type of thing, dried fruit, some nuts and seeds. Again, when we think about cereals, for example, breakfast cereals, always try and find one that's got some iron added into it. Even some porridges that are available now that have, iron and other vitamins and minerals added in as well. So it's trying to find most of the meals, if you're having kind of a varied balanced diet, would have little bits of iron containing foods. And then if you can add in some vitamin C to your meal, that's great. And another top tip is to try, and it's quite hard actually, even I find myself doing it, is to try not to have tea or coffee or any other drinks that contain what we call tannins, so things like red wine as well, with your meal, or kind of immediately with a snack or something like that, because those products contain these tannins which reduce how well we absorb the iron. So if we can, we usually say to wait anywhere between like half an hour and an hour between having your meal and having your tea or coffee or something like that. So yeah, those are probably my top tips for iron. And then zinc as well. So zinc again is something that is important for your immune system and wound healing. And again, it's found mainly in red meat, like you were saying, and other kind of animal sources. So zinc, again, found in a variety of foods, so things like your whole grains, beans and pulses, some of your cereals as well, nuts and seeds. So similar to iron. And again, kind of like iron, they are found in foods which annoyingly contain other chemicals that reduce how well your body absorbs the zinc, and those are called phytates. So kind of another way to try and get around that is to try and, for example, soak any dried pulses or lentils or beans before you cook with them and before you eat them, or even sprouting. You can do it yourself, or you can buy them from the supermarkets, like sprouted lentils or seeds, and those are all kind of little techniques that help to increase how well your body can absorb the zinc from the foods. So yeah, it's there's all kind of little top tips to try and improve how well your body is able to use the nutrients from these foods.
And Harpreet, what about canned legumes, like canned chickpeas? You know, how are they in terms of sort of the levels of some of these anti-nutrients? Would they be as similar as soaking or sprouting?
Yeah, so actually canning can actually increase or be a better way of getting things like zinc from your food. But it's a funny one, because the other day I was using aquafaba, you know, the water from chickpeas, and I was making meringues. And I went to work and I told my colleague, and she's like, but surely, you know, that's probably got quite a lot of kind of these anti-nutrients in it, the phytates in there. And I was like, actually, that's a really good idea, really good point. I'm not entirely sure. So it's something that, you know, it's worth thinking about. But I do know that for zinc, for example, that the canning process actually improves how well we can absorb the zinc. So again, it's something that I can look more into and get back to you on.
Oh, that would be brilliant. I was also thinking, when you were talking about iron and tannins from red meat, from red wine, that it is fortuitous that Veganuary and Dry January run nicely. So that should at least help everyone to ensure that they're getting enough iron and not too many tannins. What about carbs? I think, you know, a common question is, you know, if you're following a vegan diet, is there a risk that it becomes quite a carb heavy diet? Can you have too many carbs? Can carbs be a bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, it again comes down to, I guess, your knowledge on the different food groups, and trying to, like we said already, make sure you're including a little bit of everything in your meals throughout the day. It probably is quite easily done if, you know, if we're thinking about convenience foods, or we don't have enough time and we try and just put a meal together, that it could be quite carb heavy, for thinking of potatoes or pasta, bread, kind of those types of meals that are based around that, without maybe just with some vegetables on the side, without any protein or without any kind of dairy alternatives. So I think, depending on your level of kind of awareness of the nutrition that you need to start with, you could be at risk of having things that are quite carb heavy. But like we're saying, hopefully talks like this or other resources that we can talk about help to pick out, you know, foods that are rich in protein, foods that are good for your dairy alternatives, and then that can help to kind of balance out your meal. But yeah, I would say it could be, you know, downfall that some people fall into, especially right at the beginning. But with time, hopefully, you can increase kind of awareness of that.
So key headline is to ensure that you're getting all the food groups because all the food groups are bringing different nutrients, and that's what makes up this balanced, nutritious diet.
Yeah, definitely.
So what about if you're doing exercise? Can you follow a vegan diet and still do exercise, strenuous exercise, I don't know, endurance?
Yeah, so if there are any people on here who are already following a vegan or plant-based diet, you might be aware of lots of social media accounts of people who claim to be or are, vegan bodybuilders or vegan marathon runners, and it's all sorts. So there isn't really a limitation, but again, when it comes to exercise, even if you were having an omnivorous diet and include everything in your diet, you just need to be a little bit more aware of things like your the amount of overall energy you're having, so your carbohydrates in the day, as well as the amount of protein that you need. And protein generally can vary. So if we're thinking about cardiovascular exercise, these are very general recommendations, but cardiovascular exercise, endurance exercise, you probably need anywhere between like a gram to 1.2 grams is the general numbers per kilogram per day, so throughout the day, based on your body weight. But then obviously if you're doing things where you're trying to build muscle or bodybuilding or anything like that, and you're trying to increase your muscle mass, then obviously you'd probably need more protein in the day. And the general recommendations are anywhere up between 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram per day. So with that, you'd have to be more aware of obviously how much protein you're having in your meals, but you probably need extra snacks as well that are high in protein, extra drinks. Some people find the vegan protein drinks can be helpful. Again, as even with normal protein drinks, I would say they can be helpful for convenience, but they're not something that you need to include in your day-to-day life if the exercise side of things isn't your main focus. So yeah, they can be handy. They have their times where they're helpful, but they're not something that are essential to your kind of day-to-day nutrition. So yeah, definitely, I think your lifestyle can be supported by the vegan diet. So again, back to the main message: if it's well thought out, if it's well planned, and yeah, you're getting enough for what you need.
So that leads me to my next question. If it's well thought out and well planned, should you still think about taking supplements? Do you need any supplements, or can you get all the nutrition you need from your food?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question actually, because I think a lot of people kind of throw a bit of shade on supplements sometimes, because they think, we should be trying to get all of our nutrition from our food. Yes, that's what we've been saying. But actually, when it comes to diets where you're excluding food groups that are, you're going to be more at risk of being deficient in certain nutrients. So actually the Vegan Society and the BDA, they recommend that, supplements can actually be helpful alongside your day-to-day eating and drinking to make sure you're not missing out on any nutrients. And I agree, actually. I think we don't eat perfectly every single day. Nobody does, or not many people, most people don't. And I think supplements can be really helpful. So you could either think about trying to get like a general multivitamin, making sure that it doesn't exceed like your 100% of your need for each nutrient. Or if you were thinking about something more specifically, I would say try and get in touch with a dietitian and get some extra support to really focus on your individual diet and see, where you might be missing out and where the supplements could be helpful. Or even, you can talk to the GP as well. They might be able to help too.
Yeah, and I think, key message from that is, too much is just as bad as too little, and unfortunately there's lots of mega dose supplements out there, so don't need to overdose on the nutrients via supplements. I have seen that the Vegan Society are now actually have a supplement that they support or recommend. And there's lots of options, but of course we all know that we need to have vitamin D whether you're following a plant-based diet or not. So, that's definitely one supplement that I take. What about omega-3? Because obviously a good source for that is fish. Do you have any recommendations for those that are following a plant-based diet?
Yeah, so the omega-3s we touched on a little bit earlier. For the plant-based sources, it's the things that are, so your rapeseed oil, which again, another top tip with that is actually if you're shopping in the supermarkets and you're just looking at the bottles and it says vegetable oil, if you turn it around, the ingredients most of the time is just one ingredient and it's rapeseed oil. So that is usually much cheaper than trying to find the fancy rapeseed oil labeled bottles, which are like glass bottles that are super expensive. But actually, if you're just looking for the vegetable oil and make sure that it contains rapeseed oil, that's a cheaper alternative, and it's still the same product. So rapeseed, so rapeseed oil, then walnuts as well. The general portion is about 6 little halves in your hand, so like a small portion. Again, your chia seeds or your flaxseed or linseed, 1 tablespoon a day. You know, you can just throw it in your porridge. Those are probably the main sources of omega-3, I would say. And if you're able to cook, you know, when you're doing your cooking, adding a little bit of rapeseed oil anyway in your meals, you're kind of doing it without realizing. So yeah, those are probably the main sources.
And if you are going to be eating more fruit and vegetables, should you buy organic?
Oh, good question. Actually, going back to the omega-3 question just quickly, I just remembered there is a possibility of getting omega-3 supplements. So if you're looking for vegan ones, it would be ones that are made with microalgae. So that's something, again, I'd probably try and do a little bit of research on in terms of trying to get the best ones for you. But usually, if you're able to have the food sources regularly on a daily basis, you should generally be okay for the omega-3s. Sorry, back to your
back to the big organic question.
Yeah, that's interesting because again, in my day-to-day hospital work with cancer patients, that comes up quite often. So it's not just based on, you know, people who follow plant-based diet, but organic fruit and veg. So there is a mixture of studies and evidence at the moment that generally says that, you know, there are some potential health benefits to having organic fruit and veg, but at the moment, the actual health benefits are unclear in the sense that we know you might be able to get a little bit more nutrition from them, but they're expensive, and they don't necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be getting more nutrition in the sense that if you're eating plenty of fruit and veg, regardless, over a period of time, you're going to get the benefit of that, whether it's organic or not, if that makes sense. So that's what I would generally advise when it comes to organic food. If you can afford it and if it's something you want to do, by all means go for it. But it's not something I would say, you know, everybody needs to be doing in terms of the nutritional benefit as such over products, fruit and veg, that are not organic.
Super. And my last question. If
Yeah.
someone is thinking about trying a vegan diet or vegetarian or just trying to introduce some more plant foods into their diet, where can they go? Where can they go to get information that's reliable and, yeah, where to go in this busy
Yeah,
world
no,
of lots of websites and
yeah, definitely. And I think it's a good thing that you said reliable there because, you know, like we've mentioned already, there's so many nutrition kind of resources that aren't always reliable or science-based. Probably the top places I'd recommend are the Vegan Society nutrition section of their website. They've got really good pages with actually breakdowns on each individual nutrient as well, because they have a dietitian who works for them, so who's in charge of all of that, which is great. And then obviously we've got the British Dietetic Association. They've got kind of like a user-friendly information sheet with all information again on individual nutrients. Also on City Dietitians, there's some blog posts and resources there on plant-based diets. So yeah, I would say probably the BDA and the Vegan Society are probably my go-to ones.
oh, fabulous. That's brilliant. Well, thank you for such a fantastic
No
chat.
problem.
Lots tonight. And thank you for everyone who has joined us too. I hope you have. We're going to save it so that you can always go back and listen to it. And I think I'm going to be, because there's just lots and lots of information to sort of process and go through. Thanks, Harpreet. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you, Sasha. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, and happy for January.
Oh, thank you very much, and to you. Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye.